Welcome everyone to today's DX Cafe event, Exploring Strapi, an open source headless CMS. I'm Matthew McQueenie from Conabos. Before we get started, we want to say if you have any thoughts or questions as we move along, please type them in the chat and we will surface them throughout. There are folks watching on YouTube and there are folks watching on LinkedIn. If you type in either of those chats, we will receive them and we will surface them up to our esteemed guest today. Joining us today is Paul Bratslavsky, who's a developer advocate at Strapi, which again is an open source headless CMS. I actually got some help there, Paul, from ChatGPT for the headline, and I know we'll probably talk about that. But Paul, welcome. Could you tell us about your background and what you do at Strapi?
Yeah, so I'll do a quick version. I started my development journey late in my 30s. And after working as a developer for 3.5 years, I ended up discovering Strapi as a company. And the way I started Strapi was very interesting because I used Strapi as a user because as I started learning development, I wanted to make full stack applications, but I did not know enough about backend development. So my introduction to Strapi was literally just using it in every project I built. And eventually, the way I got hired in Strapi is I used to do a podcast with a friend of mine, and he kept getting sick and tired of me talking about Strapi all the time because to me it was just amazing. And he literally asked me, like, have you ever thought about applying? And to me, it never crossed my mind. So to surprise me, he invited one of the Strapi developer advocates at the time, Daniel, to our podcast. And I had a conversation with him, had so much fun. And Daniel kind of said, hey, we're hiring. If you send your resume, maybe we'll hire you. And that day I was like, you know what, Daniel, I'm sending my resume and I'm saying, you are my reference. And, that's how I got hired at Strapi. And now I work there as a developer advocate. And the way I look at it myself as my role, I'm a bridge between our community and our developers with our Strapi team. Part of my day-to-day job includes creating resources and doing presentations around creating the best possible DX experience for our developers in our community. We also have our Discord open office hours Monday through Friday, 12:30 CST time, if anybody wants to join. A lot of fun. And as one of our other events we host is a monthly Strapi Dev Best Practice that covers more intermediate to advanced topics. So our goal is to help our community grow as developers and have the best possible experience when using Strapi.
Well, that's great. And it's very interesting how you came to that. So I do like this effect you have on your website where it just it kind of writes all the different things you are and your many other things, including you'll have to tell us a story about the cats or the cat and the multiple keyboards so that you can work and the cat has a keyboard. But were you in an agency, you said, or were you doing were you like a independent contractor building digital experiences before Strapi?
So before Strapi, I have to give a little bit context. My previous role was teaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and martial arts. And the way I got excited about development, I used to create my own business websites for my own business using WordPress. And I kind of fell in love tinkering with the code. And so I decided to start learning to code. And initially, my first initial job was working for an agency, customizing WordPress themes. But I wasn't really keen on PHP, and I really loved React. React was starting to pick up, a lot of steam, and I was just really excited about JavaScript. So I spent a lot of time learning React. And my second job after working for the agency was working for I forgot what the proper term for it, but I think it's EHR software for hospitals. So we were creating a website with React and C#. So I worked there for 1.5 years. And then eventually I switched roles working for this financial company called Red Hog Research, where I worked as a front-end React developer. And the interesting story there is that's where I really saw the power of Strapi, because at the time they had their monolithic project that they were building that was bringing income. It had a huge user base, and the backend was written in Python. And the team was small enough where the owner of the company, he couldn't justify taking the Python developers and putting them on a new project. So as a front-end developer, I said like, hey, I use this thing called Strapi, and let me make a POC, like let me make a proof of concept and see if this is something that works for you. And so as a front-end developer, I was able to use Strapi to create a POC. They really liked what I created, and they were able to then be like, hey, why don't you build an MVC? So I was able to take it from an idea to an MVC where they were like, oh, this actually makes sense. And so based on the work that I did with using front-end technology like React, you could use anything. I'm just comfortable with React and Strapi, and we created a product just with me by myself to be able to start getting test users on it and test the idea. And once the owner, he was like, wow, this is actually going to work out. They ended up hiring more developers and building it out into an actual service. And so to me, I was like, wow, like this whole idea of Strapi and standing on the shoulders of giants, basically not trying to recreate from the wheel from the start, like really like hit home for me, because it, like when I think of development, you know, yes, everybody likes to code, but the main idea as a business is to bring your services or your product to your customers as quickly as possible. And this is where like the superpower of Strapi kind of clicked for me. And then after that role, and that story I told you how I got hired at Strapi, when I got the job at Strapi, I was like, man, this is exactly what I want to do, because I've been using Strapi as a consumer, as a user. I love it so much. And it's like dream come true to work at a company where you really love the product and what they do.
Well, that's great. And thank you to all for the notice of the echo. So hopefully we have fixed that. I'll make sure to mute while Paul's speaking. We have very good gear, but some old school issues can come to the fore. So, Paul, the next one I wanted to talk about before we jump in to Strapi is the coding after 30 property that you have. Looks like you've been doing this a while. Maybe this is the podcast that you were talking about, but can you talk a little bit about this and kind of how it came to be, and also how you are able to integrate it with your Strapi persona?
Yeah, so everybody has their own journey in development. Some people start early, some people start late. I was one of the late adapters of, you know, in my mid 30s, I was like, I need to switch careers. The job that I have, I'm getting too injured. And I really loved tinkering with coding. And so when I started my journey of learning to code, it was really frustrating, because if I go on Stack Overflow, ask a question, and usually at my age, you kind of have doubts, you know, when you're in like your mid 30s at the time. I'm in my 40s now, by the way, if you're wondering. Is you have doubts that, is this even a feasible option? And so on Stack Overflow, I would see comments like, you're too old, it's too late, just give up, which is weird, not fun. And then on YouTube, I would see videos where like in 3 months, you could become a 10x developer and make $1 billion. Literally every other video on YouTube that you see, that's what they tell you. And so I was like, you know what? There's something off in both comments here. And so I decided, let me start a YouTube channel. And the initial idea was like, let me just blog about like my journey, what I'm doing. So if you go to like the very first like videos, like I like don't know what I'm doing, I'm still learning. And then through the years of like learning, I literally went from being some random dude on YouTube who did not have a development job to getting my first job, my second job, my third job. Now I'm working on Strapi and having that journey. And what I realized, a lot of people wanted to see this realistic kind of representation of what it takes, because learning to code is actually not easy. And there's like a lot of things, and it won't take you 3 months. Maybe there's few outliers, but it does take a significant amount of time, especially if you don't have like, you know, I was a self-taught developer at the beginning. I tried to learn everything. I didn't have like a good path of what technology I should learn to get a job, all these things I had to learn. And it literally took me, you know, a while. And what I started getting feedback on my channel is like, wow, like your experience has helped us, number one, to have realistic expectation and not give up 3 to 4 months into it when we still don't have a job. And also kind of seeing like a person who actually went through the journey and achieved the result that we're looking to achieve is pretty motivating. And that's basically how the channel came to be. And I still do it because one of the reasons why because it did lead to opportunities. When I started meeting more people on YouTube, I had actually other job opportunities and offers that came through meeting other developers on YouTube and having that network and connection. And also through doing my YouTube channel, the podcast I was referring, there's a YouTube channel called Coding Addict. So he's the one who used to do the podcast, but I met him on YouTube and I ended up going on his podcast, building a relationship that eventually led to my job opportunities. And for anybody who's looking to break into the industry, the one thing that I would say, if I were to say, if you're going to focus on one thing, it's actually not just learning to code, but it's building connections with other people and networking. And you will always have an easier path to getting employed is through someone you know and through referrals. And this is something that I tell everybody. And I still stand to this day. This is the best way if you want to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, relationships are magical in both databases and people, right? So as I set up the Strapi portion, where we'll talk deeper into Strapi's origins and market position, and you will actually give us a demo as well, which is pretty awesome. Why don't you tell us quickly the story I alluded to about the cat and the multiple keyboards?
Yeah. So I'm just going to move my camera. So I have my daughter's cats. And as you could see, I have 2 keyboards. The reason why I have 2 keyboards is because she loves sleeping on one of them. And so when I used to have one keyboard, I would not say I didn't get any work done, but I'm just saying I had to get a second keyboard for my cat. And the interesting story about my cats, they're not even my cats. My daughter, she's in the Navy. She's been in Japan for 3 years. And before going to the Navy, she literally is like, Dad, I want to come visit you. I think it'll be fun to hang out. Literally what that meant is like, hey, I have these 2 cats that I want you to take care of while I'm gone. And so I appreciate it. But now I tell her, I don't know if you'll ever get them back. And so she's preparing. She's like, okay, when I'm back from Japan, I'm bringing you a kitten to trade for my 2 cats that are mine. And she's like, you can't take ownership of them. But yeah, that's right there.
Love it. So let's transition over to Strapi. So we see some details here on the screen, but why don't you give us a little bit of a breakdown on how Strapi started?
So Pierre, Jim, and Aurelian, they were college students together, and the birth of Strapi came from their frustration of building websites for customers with WordPress, because they wanted something that allow you to deliver content everywhere and had a better developer experience, and more importantly, using more of like modern frameworks. So they started Strapi in 2015. And interesting thing about Strapi, a lot of people ask like, well, where did the Strapi name come from? And so it literally came from 2 words, bootstrap and API. And the idea is like you're bootstrapping an API. Obviously, it's more than an API. It's a complete content management system, which is highly customizable. But now you know where Strapi name came from.
That is I learned something every day. I did not realize that part. It's a cool, modern sounding name there. So why don't we go a little bit into what we always have in our case studies, right? What was the original problem? How is it being fixed? And where does Strapi sit in that breach?
So one of the biggest things nowadays is the growing complexity of requirements for a project. And a lot of times you're not able to see like every possible thing that's going to happen. So having this ability and flexibility to adapt to those changes is very important. And so that's the idea of Strapi, to give you the ability to adapt with the changes and allow you to add additional features that maybe you didn't think of at the time when you were creating the project.
Perfect. Okay. And so I really like this slide to, I think, answer several of the pieces which might help us understand where Strapi sits. So I think if we can break down these 3 pieces, and especially To me, the one that stands out is the open source part,
Yeah.
and potentially that's because we're not used to that in the enterprise marketplace. I think back to WordPress makes sense when you told some of that story, but if you could break down this slide here and how important these three elements are.
Yes. So when I think of like what composability and headless CMS means, it literally means freedom to be able to adapt to the changing environment, and we all have different requirements. And so when I think of customizability, I think of having developers have the ability to choose what services that they're able to integrate, what databases they use, and having that freedom to use your favorite framework, to use the services that you're accustomed, and having an ability to easily integrate it into your product is very, very, very important. And the second point here, like the extensible architecture, accelerate your time to production. This is something that I experienced in my previous example at the Red Hawk research company that I worked for, where I was able to take an idea and iterate through it quickly enough with a very small team, literally by myself, to bring the idea to market. And whenever we needed custom features, if there wasn't a plugin that existed on our plugin marketplace to give us that customizability, we as developers had the freedom to create that provider or their plugin ourselves and add any custom functionality that our product needed. And I really like that about the development experiences, because you have a starting point, you have all these functionality out of the box, but if there's something missing, if you can't find it on a plugin store, the provider doesn't exist, as a developer, you have the ability to create it yourself. And then what's really awesome, at the same time as the developer is building the backend, working on adding additional functionality, your content managers in parallel could start working on the content side of things. So that way there is not that much of time that goes between like waiting on the developer to do something, just so as a content editor, you could do something on your front end. Because you're using Strapi like a content management system, right when you set it up, your content editors, managers could start working right away in parallel with developers, which greatly decreases time going to the market and bringing your idea to life. And the last point is the one that is what we at Strapi take pride in, because we do have the largest open source community with the most amazing community members. If you go on our Discord, the best part that I love about it is that everybody's helping everybody else to grow. And so whenever anybody has a question, like the biggest thing is sometimes when you try a new service, you try a new product, is you're wondering like, is there enough like resources? Is there enough documentation? We try to do the best that we can. And of course, nobody is perfect. Sometimes you might miss something, but the fact that we have this amazing community, you could jump in and start asking questions and working from other people's lessons learned from working with Strapi. We have amazing contributors to Strapi. So if you wanted to yourself, you could go to our Strapi repo and you could start looking through our issues. You could contribute. You could have a say in what we do. And I think that's such a huge part of having an open source community and doing things in that open environment.
Paul, could you speak more to that open source piece? Like what does it mean from a framework point of view? What does it mean relative to potentially what competitors in the space are doing, whether those competitors are, if we consider WordPress, right up into some of the enterprise headless CMSs? Like what's the difference there when you use the word open source?
So for us, like our code base is out in the open, and people have and see what we're doing on day to day. And we also have our Candy board where people are able to give feedback on the things we're doing. And so from that point of view, just with what I mentioned, it gives us a really good view of seeing what does our community want, what features we need to develop. And so we don't have to, just guess what the next feature to develop for Strapi that we need. And having that feedback allows to kind of stay on point and be like, hey, this is what our community is asking. Maybe this is a feature we should explore. I feel like when you have a closed source project where you kind of decide what you think is right as a product, it may slow down like the process of iteration or development from the standpoint of discovering what next amazing feature should have. Also having, our project being open source, we have a couple of different tiers of our project. So our community edition is always free for our community to use. And you could use it in any way that fits your project. And like you could literally take the repo, copy it, and customize it to whatever desire that you want and build your own product or service that you're looking for. And that is, the power of having these open source projects, because you literally get the freedom to do what you need.
That's amazing. So in some ways, I don't know if the right term is white label, or it seems to me that you could almost build something without having to there's rules about using the Strapi, the branding and the basis of it.
Right.
You could almost build something without getting involved in like business agreements and all that kind of stuff.
Right. And there are some like proprietary code that we have, and you can't find it, but it's included in our enterprise edition. So it's not our community edition. And our enterprise edition is our paid service, and you do get some proprietary features that are not included in the community edition. That's something that's more akin to enterprise users. And you also get the support of our solution engineers. But in terms of using the community edition, yes, that's absolutely true.
Nice. So one of the questions we like to ask is how you define headless and composable. And I thought that this might be a good slide to help talk about that from an ecosystem point of view. So if you would.
Yeah. And so to me, and again, what's interesting, whenever I talk about headless and composable, I realize that there might be a mismatch between what that means, because someone could be more of a developer background, and that could have slightly different meaning to someone for marketing. And because I always perceive things from the developer perspective, that's kind of like the lens that I'm going to go through. And when I look at composability or headless, to me, it literally means having the freedom to choose what services and what things you integrate in your application. And so what I like about this particular slide is that you see all these different services and providers that you have access to. So as a developer, you have the freedom to choose and incorporate the services that make sense for your particular solution that you're working with. And the best part about this, we do have some out-of-the-box providers, plugins that you could download and start using. But as a developer, you also have the freedom, if there's a service that you really like using, like one example, ChatGPT is becoming very popular, but there was no real way to use ChatGPT with Strapi. So Maxime, one of our teammates at Strapi, he created a plugin that allows you to use ChatGPT in Strapi to create content. And I think that is the real power, is that you have the flexibility and the freedom to integrate your tooling, your frameworks of choice, and other technologies that you like to use.
That's awesome. So you brought that up there. How are you seeing ChatGPT being used in the CMS sphere?
It's so new, and it's changing by the second every day. But what I, for myself personally, realized that AI is definitely here to stay. It's not going to go back into the box, right? The genie's out of the box. So a lot of the new projects that I try to create, I try to find interesting ways of using AI and create some sort of services. And I'm new to that space, and so I'm still learning. But I do think having AI-powered features and this is not something that's happening, but just ideas that people have. But wouldn't it be nice to have your Copilot-like functionality within your Strapi application, that allows you to have a better experience, creating content types, or if you have a question, you could directly ask in the chat. And so I think that is something that would be really, really awesome. And I was, at Strapi, we do have these cool down weeks where you get to pick something that you want to do, a particular thing you want to try. So I wanted to figure out, another interesting use case. How can we integrate AI into Strapi in some sort of way?
That's great. And I mean, from your two sides of the brain as a developer and as a content creator, I'm sure that you've found a couple of use cases in your own day to day where it's been extremely helpful for you.
Yeah. The interesting question I have, like, I think it's moving so fast. I wonder, if there's going to be certain like rules or litigation in terms of how can you use AI, because as a fun project, I made it as a joke, but then I saw like that it's something that could be abused. So everybody knows YouTube Shorts. So I created a Chrome extension which will literally take the video short and convert it into a long form blog post and add any additional information that might have not been like mentioned in detail in the short, and it will automatically publish to my Strapi blog post, like with just me doing that one link. And like, it's a project that I did just to learn how to like use AI, how to go through the process. But to me, I was just kind of blown away. Like, I'm not publicly showing that. I'm not saying that content is mine. It clearly says AI generated from, short video. Check out the short video. But just seeing that could be done, it's kind of exciting, but also scary at the same time. It's like, how do you, like, what does that mean for content creators in general?
Yeah, no, I mean, we had a discussion a couple of months ago on a DX Cafe about like newspapers and how you have all these writers, right? And you want to be able to say, like, if several writers work on an article, they'll say the byline will have all those writers. Are we going to need to add an AI byline? And then what if the AI content is created from a database of your own newspaper's content too? So yeah, there's some interesting things there.
So we do have Write for the Community, where guest writers could write and post articles on our website. And we had cases where they blatantly had articles written by ChatGPT. And so we did make a rule. You cannot use ChatGPT to write your whole article. We still have like a more flexible rule, like you could use it for research, but you still have to kind of write and edit and put your own spin on the article yourself. But we definitely see people try to use it more and more, just to, get more bang for their time invested on writing articles.
Yeah, no, very interesting. So from the point of view, we talked about this with the marketplace. This makes a lot of sense when you talked about the Strapi being kind of an answer to issues that customers might have had with WordPress, to try to make that better. Because WordPress, that was when I saw this, plugins, marketplace, I felt very WordPressy. So if you could talk about what this means to Strapi, and also, like you said, if there's not a plugin in here, does it easily fall back into kind of mock compliant technology where it's still as simple to connect through APIs and such?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's many ways to customize Strapi. And so you do have all that traditional ways. Before I talk more on plugins, you could write custom controllers, routes, services, middlewares, and policies. And you could integrate like certain third services directly through the code, because Strapi is highly customizable. But sometimes, like, if you want to make something that's shareable, or there's going to be other people that want to have that same use case, take that logic that you would have normally put into your Strapi application, and you could build a plugin. And the benefit of a plugin is that you could share with others, like as you could see here on Strapi Marketplace. And so if you create something that could be used by many other people, it's a great way to share what you've done. And also from the standpoint of the marketplace, sometimes when people look into like discover Strapi right for them, they have an idea of like certain functionality that they want their application to have. And so they'll go and download Strapi, and then like, well, it doesn't quite have the thing that I'm looking for. And so they'll go and check out Strapi Marketplace to see, is there a plugin for that extends that functionality? And that's where the benefit comes of having plugins. The challenge of having plugins, like if with WordPress, there's many great plugins, there's many not so great plugins, and then kind of have to figure out which one is which. But I think it's a good challenge to have, especially when you're adding value to the product and the services. And we have plugins and we have providers. Providers could be like, how to hook up your S3 bucket to your Strapi application, or any other like image provider or service that you want.
How would an applicant get into this marketplace? Is there a
Yeah.
vetting?
So there's like one of the links says like the screen is too small, but it does say like, submit your plugin. And then when you go to it, if you've never built a plugin, it will give you the resources of how to get started, like what you need to do. We're constantly working on improving our plugin documentation. I released a YouTube playlist on our Strapi YouTube channel that walks folks how to create a simple plugin. And also, one thing that I don't want to forget to mention, when I say plugins, it's a great way for you to add additional functionality to Strapi, but we also have a way for you to create custom fields. So if there's a field type that doesn't exist in Strapi, you now have an ability to create like a custom field. Like one good example could be a map field, which you're allowed to pin the location with the address, or like a color picker, or something like that. So to me, this is the power. And again, I could be biased because I grew up on using Strapi and on my learning journey of learning to code. It was like such a great experience, and then now working there. But the power that came to me from Strapi is that you can use it in many ways that you like. And if you need to extend it, we have our plugins. If if there doesn't exist, you could literally write that custom logic yourself. And I just give you like a different example of how I'm using Strapi at the moment. I have many different projects, but I've been exploring, learning more about AI, and there's many different AI APIs that you could use. And so I wanted to have a easy place to store my tokens so they're not publicly exposed. So I create a Strapi application specifically to add a bunch of different routes that point to my custom controllers that call different various AI APIs with very specific use cases for me. And so now I have one Strapi app that you could say could kind of be like a little microservice that allows me to group all my AI functionality from all the different APIs in one use case. And so now, if I want to, for instance, I have one that does video transcription, I have one that does post summary, I have one, whatever. And all I have to do is literally hit my Strapi route with my access token that I have and get that functionality. And the cool part is now I could do it from any application I want. And I don't need to directly integrate that use case or that service into that particular application.
So something you said with the Strapi YouTube, I want to ask you a kind of tangential question for those in our audience who might be in marketing or community, social media. You guys have a very active, engaged YouTube channel in particular. Are there any best practices, tips you can give as to how you are able to make that happen?
So to us, it's still a learning journey. We could always do a lot of things better. And the idea of having a monthly community call and sharing what you're doing with your community is really important. And one thing that we started to do now is to start to highlight our community members, and not being here's what we're doing at Strapi, but if we find a community member that's doing something cool in our community, they found a cool use case for Strapi or build a plugin, we'd like to invite them on the show and have them share their story about what they're doing. I think anything that you do in social media, the more you could talk about your community, the farther you will go, rather than just talking about yourself and having that one-way conversation. And that was one of the reasons we also incorporated open office hours. And the reason why we did it was very simple, is because Discord is asynchronous, right? And sometimes people will come in and they'll make a comment, and everybody's different. Sometimes people will be like, nobody responded to me within 30 seconds. Nobody's talking here, right? And it happens. It's a very small amount, but we wanted to create a time where hey, at this time, if you have a question, if you have a burning like something you want to share with us, even if it's a complaint, you're able to jump in and speak to a live person from the Strapi team. And so now there's like literally no barrier to like sharing your thoughts about how you feel about the community, and hopefully it's all positive. Is you have that space to come in and talk to us, and that has been like another great addition. So I think like having, doesn't matter if it's YouTube, doesn't matter if it's Discord, but having this ability for people to connect with you on more of a personal level and chat with you, I think is super important.
Absolutely. So on this slide here, I'm going to ask the leading question of, why is there a need for self-hosted? Isn't everything supposed to be in the cloud? And can headless and composable be self-hosted?
100%. And I agree with that, until you're a company that's working with very important data that you're like, I need to control it. If this gets out, like privacy, like financial stuff, medical stuff, sometimes people need to control their data. And this is why we always will have like that self-hosted option, because you should have the freedom to choose, what you do with your data and how you store it. So majority of our enterprise, clients, that's the path they go on, is that they do their own self-hosted solution, because number one, they control their data. They're able to engineer the process, the flow in the way that they want. That, like whenever you're an enterprise organization, you need to have certain redundancies. You need to have a very, complex database architecture. Make sure that there's no chance of failure. And this is something that allows people that are self-hosted to be in control and decide how much of that they create in their system. And that's why we still have it. But at the same time, we do have a lot of people that they don't want to bother with like, I don't even want to do my self-hosted. I don't want to think about managing my deployment process and learning any of the DevOps. Maybe you have a smaller team, or you just don't have any interest. This is where, our Strapi Cloud solution comes in, where it's like, hey, you just want to focus on your product. You just want to focus on the service and bringing a solution to your clients as quickly as possible. So that's where Strapi Cloud fits in. Is very easy to deploy. You literally just point to your GitHub repo of your Strapi project, click deploy, and it's done.
So we have a question, Paul. We're getting some security things, so it's a LinkedIn user. But the question is, does Strapi have support plans if you decide to self-host?
So that's a great question, because Strapi's open source. We give like our community edition is absolutely free for life. You could use that solution as self-host option. And one of the ways that we make income is providing solution engineers for support for those self-hosted options. But that's only available if you choose the Strapi Enterprise plan. So if you choose to do something self-hosted, and you're using the community edition, this is something you're responsible for. But with that being said, I did mention our community open office hours where you could come in and ask questions. I mentioned our Discord community, our docs, that you come and you could ask questions, learn, how to solve some of the problems that you may have. But in terms of having like actual solution engineers helping you out, that's included with our Strapi Enterprise.
And that was from Cam Ruz-Jaman over here at Conabos. So thanks, Cam, for that question.
Nice.
The one thing I would bring up, though, Paul, do you find, because there is a meaningful customer base who need that security, do you find that this is actually a unique selling proposition to have the self-hosted, composable, headless solution?
Yeah, no, definitely is. And majority of our enterprise clients like fall into that category. So there's still like a huge need for having all the customization, flexibility, composability that we mentioned, but also having that self-hosting support to allow companies control their data. And that's something that separates us from some of our competitors who only offer cloud solution and don't have any self-host.
Nice, and we do a lot of work with Sitecore as well, and as part of their next generation composable DXP, they also have maintained, in their case, they call it a private cloud, right, on your cloud.
Right.
So there is always, I think there's even reasons of being in certain parts of the world where there might not be the infrastructure in place to have true cloud, like where you might have to have a few server farms and there's only one. So there definitely is a place for it, and we know so much comes back around in life and in any industry. So there's nothing to say that we might not come back to some form of self-hosting as a preferred element. Yeah.
I was going to quickly add to that. I heard that there's a lot of companies that are actually starting to rethink this idea of bringing things back to their own like bare metal and their own hosting and controlling the data. And I don't know if it's, is there like limitations that they're hitting with certain cloud solutions, or is it the fact that now with, ChatGPT scraping all of the internet and what have it, it's like, are people getting paranoid about like who controls whose data? And it's like, maybe we should focus on bringing things back and like being in control of our data. I don't know if that one might be me putting on my tinfoil hat, but I feel like in certain scenarios, your example where you mentioned certain people not having the infrastructure to have access to the cloud and having to do certain things on-prem and in their own way, I think is important.
Yeah, I mean, go back to your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu days and remember the person who kicks into the year and starts training like crazy every single day, and we're detrained. There's unintended consequences with really anything we do. So really the thing to do is to stay on top of the trends, be aware of all the positives, but also all the stories where you can learn from it. And everybody has a unique situation. Every corporation, organization has a unique, their own unique road plan, right, or their roadmap. So that's always an important piece. So on this one, this was an important slide for Strapi, and I'd like you to talk a bit about the role-based access and one other point that I've heard a lot of, and that is that in today's CMS and today's DXP, there are many more users. Sometimes they're called citizen developers, right? But there are many more users in CMSs than there were 10 years ago, where maybe there were a couple of IT guys who were the gatekeepers. Is that a reason why role-based access can be an important piece to raise?
Yeah, 100%. And what's interesting about the reason why I wanted to highlight this slide is that our RBAC system, or role-based access control, was only, in terms of how much you can customize of it, was only available in the enterprise paid version. And in your community version, you only had 3 roles and that you could customize. And so many people were talking about how there's a need to have a very robust RBAC system, which allows you to set different control for different type of users, especially because of what you just mentioned. There's so many people that are working inside the CMS that have different roles, from content editor, content manager, all these different things, is to give developers the flexibility, not even developers, but people, admins in your CMS, to be able to define those roles very easily. And what's awesome, like RBAC allows you to do it literally all the way to the field level, right? Which is pretty awesome. And so here's one benefit of like where the community was like, man, this is a very big, important feature. Like, wouldn't it be nice if you could offer it in the community edition? And that's exactly what Strapi did. They took, at the time, like this was one of our big selling points for the enterprise edition, but because like, man, this is going to benefit the community, even though this is a paid feature, we're going to make it free and available to everybody. And I think that was like pretty awesome.
Perfect. So before we move into a little bit of demo, which to get you set for that shortly, there's this share screen at the bottom of our queue here, and then I will promote you into that. But very quickly, give us your elevator pitch on why Strapi here.
So to me, like again, some people be like, you're biased, but I told you that story about when I worked at a Red Hawk research company where we needed to make a new product. And as a solo developer, especially more into front end, Strapi allowed me to go from proof of concept to MVC that got our whole team sold on the product and now became an additional product that that company has. And the reason why I was able to do that is, number one, Strapi allowed me to stand on the shoulders of giants. I didn't have to recreate the wheel from the start. I was able to have a jump off point from which I could start creating our product. And the thing that helped me is, number one, it's open source. It is highly community driven. So any question I had, I could go on the forum, I could go on a Discord, and any new feature that my boss would ask, I was able to figure out how to integrate, because Strapi is highly customizable and allows you to, customize your routes, controllers, services, policies, middleware to like suit your use case. And the best part about it, because I was a front-end developer, and because Strapi is built in Node, I didn't need to learn a second or third language. As a JavaScript developer, I was able to go pretty far. And what's awesome, once the project picked up steam and our company at the time started to hire new developers, it's very easy. All we had to do is find someone who knew JavaScript. So from that hiring standpoint, for at least in our use case, it was very easy to find junior to mid-level developers that could actually go really far with Strapi, which is pretty awesome. And to the point that I mentioned, it allows like for fast development. I know everybody as a developer likes building cool things, but as a company owner or any person that's responsible for that, they don't care about the development so much. They care, can we take our solution to the market and how fast can we get there? And does it work? And so having tooling that allows you to decrease time to market, to me, is very, very important, because it literally, like, the best way to try your idea is to get it in front of real customers. I worked for a company, which was a long time ago. This was my first company that I started with. I worked there for a year and a half. The year and a half I worked there, they were working on a product that they still didn't take to market. And I haven't worked there for 3.5 years now. I don't think they still went to the market. And so to me, anything that you could do that brings you in front of your customers, that could start giving you feedback, so you could start, updating your product based on actual customer feedback, is super important. And for me, Strapi allows you to do that. And it gives you, like we talked about, composability, using different services, using any front-end framework that you want. That's a huge plus. Another thing that I really like is that it gives you the flexibility to deliver content to any device. It could be, your website, your mobile app, your IoT device. It could be a refrigerator if you wanted to. There's many use cases where Strapi is used to deliver content to places that you would not typically think of Strapi or a CMS delivering content to, which is pretty awesome. And now that we have Strapi Cloud, I think for people that don't want to worry about managing the deployment, having issues, troubleshooting deployment, that's a perfect fit for them. And at the same time, like we talked about, we do have the self-hosted option, which for many enterprise users that have data that they need to have control over, gives them that option to do that.
Very cool. So, Paul, the one thing we haven't brought up as we get ready for our demo here, how does the price work? And potentially, as we look at it in relation to competitors in the market, I assume it's pretty competitive with in the marketplace. There's different tiers, right? Like, how does the pricing work?
The enterprise edition, to be honest, I don't have the numbers. That's something like you would have to schedule because it has too many variables to be able to give a number. And so the best way to do it is to try it out and to schedule a call with one of our salespeople, because it really depends on your requirements, how many people you have, and all the different things you're going to do. But in terms of Strapi Cloud, and we did get a little bit of flag because, and before I share this, but you could keep it here, is that, there's so many services that start with a free tier. And at Strapi, we decided to start with our pro plan, and for a couple of different reasons. Because we are open source company, there's so much stuff that we give, and provide for free, like the community Strapi edition. It's free for life, and you could literally just use that for your project and take it as far as you want. And so we need to, and for instance, RBAC features that we had in like enterprise edition is now free in the community edition. So we always try to bring value to the free community edition to give you more. That we do have to kind of, again, we are a business, we have to make money, and the two ways that we're trying to accomplish this is through our solution engineer support, and now we have our Strapi Cloud. And so instead of starting with a free tier, we decided to start with our pro tier, which is $100 a month. And for some people, it might be like, it's a no-go for me. And the way I look at it is, that's a very fair, statement. And like, as a person who's building a pet project, $100 a month might not make sense to me. But if I'm an agency and I'm building Strapi-powered like business websites for my customers, that's a cost that I could, like $99 a month for a business, that is pretty reasonable. And so that's why we decided to go with our pro plan, and to allow people to easily focus on being able to deploy their application to Strapi. And here I'll quickly do my demo. I know like some people like demos, some people are bored demos, but I'm logged into our Strapi Cloud dashboard. Here I have 4 different projects that I manage. And so a lot of times, one of the things that people ask us is, can you have multi-tenancy with Strapi? We could talk about what that actually means, but what a lot of people mean when they say that is they want a central place to be able to manage their projects and not really talk about true multi-tenancy. And this is like one of the reasons I like Strapi Cloud, is that if I have 4 different projects for 4 different businesses, I have them and I'm able to manage them all in one screen here. And typically, to create a project, you're able to go ahead and click create. Here you right away see our pricing. It's $99 a month for our pro. We also have our team subscription model. For most people, pro is perfectly fine. You get 10 CMS seats, 1,000 database entries, 150 gigabytes assets of storage, 500 gigabytes of asset bandwidth, 1 million API requests. And if you click next, you put in your credentials, and you literally just point to your GitHub repo that has your Strapi project, and you're able to, with one click, get it to the cloud. And so the basic like development cycle looks like is you have your local project that you develop at home on your computer, and when you're ready, you have the deployed portion that's in production that's living on Strapi Cloud. And some of the features you see here, we could go to our deploys. You'll have a screen which will show all your recent deploys, and you're able to kind of click at any one of them and take a look where you have access to your build logs during the build process. You have your deploy logs, just in case if something does go wrong, you'll be able to catch it. And once your application is up and running, you have your running log that you could kind of see and check. And you're able to, in settings, manage your environmental variables. You're able to go to billing to kind of see like, okay, where am I at my usage and my limits? And so it gives you like a very simple like interface to be able to kind of manage all your different Strapi projects that you have. And then one thing you're not doing is you're not thinking about like DevOps. You're not thinking about, well, what do I have to take into consideration? All of that is done for you. And so as a business owner or a marketing agency that builds websites that uses Strapi, this is just a very easy and convenient way to manage things. And then you're able to like click visit your app, will take you to where you log in. I'm already logged into one of my applications, and here's our Strapi UI. This is for a simple blog website. I could see my articles and all this other great stuff. And so I'm like, what I like about this from my personal perspective, I really like, I love development, but I really like having a product out there in the wild that people are using. And this just takes away a few steps that I don't have to worry about to allow you to easily to deploy your application to Strapi Cloud. If you want to check it out, you could go to strapi.io/cloud. You could learn more about it. Try it out. Give us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you.
Paul, does having such a robust community, even utilizing the free tier, I assume that makes the product better at the upper echelons of enterprise editions, just because that's a lot of UAT going on, if you will.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why, as a developer advocate, I always push to continue to figure out ways, how can we serve our community better, and how can we have open communication? Like, to be honest, we're not perfect, and we sometimes have tough conversations with our community, and they're just part of having open source project and being out in the open. And sometimes you learn lessons that you should have learned earlier, but it's just the nature of doing things. And so by having good community, by having those discussions when things go great, and then sometimes when things don't have great, but still able to have a conversation, allows us to make decisions and kind of self-correct very quickly. And I think that's the power of having a community where people are engaged with your product and service. And that's one benefit of having, like you said, Strapi Community Edition, because it's available to everybody, and everybody could use it and provide their feedback and on their experience.
Well, this was great, Paul. Really appreciate it. I also learned on StreamYards we should use headphones. For myself, you have them on. But it was a pleasure speaking with you, learning a lot about Strapi here, including the cool origins of the name. And hopefully we can pick up the conversation as we move down the road.
Yeah, no, it was great meeting you, Matt. Thank you so much for having me, and for Mark for introducing us. I had a blast, and thanks everyone for joining.
Yep, thanks to Mark Raymond.